All right. Savio Ima and Savio Mary, you're welcome to this training session. Um, I remember before we closed our last week session, we talked about the need for you to have an in-depth knowledge of rental valuation. In fact, for you to have knowledge of rental valuation, you have to have a handful of knowledge of rent and analysis. It is the rent and analysis that will now lead you to understanding rental valuation. And then over time, I would explain to you the need for rental valuation and where such could come up. But let's start with what rent is. You know, most properties that are built by clients are built for multiple reasons, depending on the client's choice or the client's needs. There are properties that are built strictly for residential use, such as your family house or any other known property that is used for residential accommodation where the owner lives or his family lives. There are occasions where an for commercial use. Then there are occasions where a proposed investor has money. He doesn't know whether to build and sell or to build and rent out or lease out. These are differing circumstances. But because we're dealing with rental analysis that will lead to rental valuation, we want to prune our discussion to rent and rental analysis and then rental valuation. Rent is the monthly, in fact, rent can be the daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annual income accruable to a property which is given out for commercial use. The doctrine of rent sees capital sum which is invested today to give you streams of income over time. That is the doctrine of rent. In other words, rent is saying put a lump sum into real estate investment and get trickles of that sum over time. That over time could be over 20 years, over 50 years, depending on other factors. So, where a property has been so developed, maybe a commercial building like your normal, what you call your plazas, right? Or your commercial shops, or a building for residential use that is on lease. Okay? A building for commercial use that is on lease. There are occasions where you see a landlord has built a block of 4 flats. He's in 1 flat. The other 3 flats are on lease. Those other 3 flats are generating income for him. The advantage of such leasehold investment is that it does 2 things. One, it secures your capital. By security of capital, it means that money you have invested in developing that building cannot go less. If you have used 100 million to develop your building, your commercial building, that 100 million cannot become 80 million. So you have secured that capital. If you put that 100 million in the bank, at the end of the year, you won't get 110 million. Because if you look at the whatever the bank will give you for saving that money, it won't be up to 10% for the whole year. But by the time you invest 100 million in a property, in a lettable property and you are um, receiving rent, the rent you receive for the first year is, let's say you receive 2.5 million per apartment times 4 flats, which is 10 million. It means at the end of the first year, you would have 10 million plus the 100 million. Do you get the point? So the investment is it secures rental properties or commercial properties secures your investment or secures your fund. Another thing it does is that it is a hedge against inflation. I'll explain. If you have gotten into or entered into an agreement, a lease agreement with um, your tenant, let's say you have a tenant who pays 5 years in the first instance, okay? The rent is per annum. The rent agreement says that this person shall pay 5 years in the first instance. It means he has paid for 5 years. Whether or not there is inflation at the second year is immaterial. You don't understand. If the person, okay, let's say I'm the landlord, you are my tenant, you are also my tenant, and I want to give out this space for, let's say, 5 million per annum. We're talking about, let's say, a wing of duplex, 2 wings, 3 bedroom duplex on the left, 3 bedroom duplex on the right. You take in the right, he takes the left, and the duplex is going for, let's say, 1 million per annum, assuming you take 1 wing. And I tell you that I want somebody to pay for 5 years, or otherwise I'll let it be like that until I get somebody. You tell me that you are willing to pay for 5 years, and you credit me, and I sign your tenancy or lease agreement, and I also sign, of course, I'm calling it lease agreement now because it has moved from um, a yearly agreement, a yearly tenancy, to a tenancy that spans above 3 years. In fact, any tenancy that spans above 3 years in the first instance becomes a lease, right? So sometimes you can use tenancy and lease interchangeably depending on the context. Okay, the longer period of tenancy, progresses or transfers to lease. All right, so you now pay for 5 years. He pays for 5 years. It means I've gotten 10 million on that property, right? This is 2026. If anything happens in 2027 and there is inflation, things are expensive, and so people are no longer able to afford things because they are expensive, it doesn't affect me because you have already paid for that period of 5 years. So on the one hand, that lease arrangement has already protected me against whatever inflation. So if inflation was to have, if not that you had paid and inflation affects my property, two things will happen. Because there is a high price, an unnecessary high price of commodity, it is very probable that somebody, or possible that people will not be able to afford my apartment. Because when I also look at it, the cost of building the property is also high. Everything is high, 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 right? So it's most investments drag during inflation or hyperinflation. But my investment will not drag because we had already closed up on the transaction on lease, and we have determined it by way of we have executed it, not determined. To determine means to end. We have executed, that lease agreement. So whatever happens between the year 1 to year 5 it doesn't disturb me. My investment is protected. It doesn't also reduce the value of my property, either yearly or as the case may be. You get? So that's the advantage of rent or lease. It has other advantages. So the next question is, how do you assign rent to a property? It is when you know how to assign rent on a property before we now look at analyzing rent. You assign rent to a property using at least two known models. There are more models, but let's use two known models. Model number one is by looking at market comparables or direct market comparison of rental values. Are you taking your notes? Now, when we say direct market comparison of rental values, we're looking at a situation where you've built a block of 4 flats, regardless of the location. You have built it to your own taste, according to your specified design. You are thinking, how much should I put as rent? And then you meet a professional like an estate surveyor and valuer, who we are. And the professional tells you, well, allow me to find out what is obtainable in the market. Let's use a scenario before we now apply it to this subject discussion. If you want to buy a car, let's say you want to buy a Toyota car, let's say a Toyota Corolla 2010 model. You have excess money, but you want to find out how much is Corolla 2010 model sold, isn't it? Yes. Now, 2010 model Corolla could have American spec or other specs. It could also have other colors. I know that as a car freak, most cars that are in white colors are cheaper, maybe with 500,000 or with $1 million, than most cars that are painted in black. In fact, black, gray, these are seen as official colors, and their prices are higher than, when you want to pay for the car, you call the car dealer. How much are you selling? He tells you 2010 Corolla is going for, that he's selling for, let's say 15 million, or let's say 10 million, because price of cars have dropped. And you say, okay, I'll get back to you. What will you do next? You call someone else. Maybe by the time you drive around 3 or 4 car dealers, something will now happen. You will find out that that model of car is plus or minus 2 million. Either car vendor A is selling above 10 million, assuming the ceiling price is 15 million. Somebody may be selling for 13 million. Somebody may be selling for 14 million. Somebody may be selling for 15 million. Somebody may be selling for 16 million. You will now ask, why are the prices not the same? And then you will find out that there are so many reasons the prices are not the same. One of the reasons is that the source from which he got it, maybe the country of purchase, or perhaps Dumorage may have caught up with that car in Lagos and then he had to pay more. Or perhaps this car is newer or it's cleaner. My noble colleague, good morning, how are you? Good morning. Good to see you. Yeah, we're having a training section here. Wow. So we're inviting you to join us when you have settled. Well done. So you find out that the person who is selling above 15 million may be selling because of some extenuating or limiting circumstance that made his price that high. Some other car vendors may choose to sell because they want to just sell. Let the car leave their shop and let them get, or maybe they want to use money for something else. So, but there is something that must happen. The price of that model of car must not be too far away apart. We have said the ceiling price is 15 million. So you may have it for 13, 14, 15, or 16, or 17. But it will not be 25 million. It will not be 30 million. It can never be twice the price. By this, you have compared market price or prices for that particular car. Right? Transfer this analogy or scenario to the rental analysis. We are treating rental analysis, and I need them to know how to get rent and advice same to the client who has built and who does not know how much to charge on a property. In fact, we have a property at Ogwash currently. And between last month and so, we're struggling to get the adequate rent chargeable on that property. So at that point, I said, since they're in training, let us now look at the doctrine of rent and so on and so forth. So we're looking at this person has now built and he's asking you, how much should I charge on as rent? Flowing from this scenario we created or painted, you can now say, okay, as a professional, let me go and find out how much rent is going for on similar properties. Now, the property must be similar in design and most often similar in finishings. For instance, you cannot use a room and parlor as a comparable to a duplex. They are not similar in design. They can never be, in fact, they can never be. One is a bungalow, one is a duplex on one floor. You might not also get it right if you use a duplex which you are, the rent for the duplex is unknown. Is unknown. You now go and look at a 3-bedroom apartment, maybe a block of 4 flats, and use the rent on each of the flats as a basis for comparing so as to compare to the duplex that is vacant. It is not also similar in design. What do you now do? You now look for a duplex in that neighborhood that at least is also a duplex. By the time you see that duplex, you will now be asking further questions. You see now it's tasking. It's very tasking. Rent analysis is very tasking. Because there are occasions where you have no in fact, you have no basis for comparison. That is where you you will not go into you will not go academics. We'll get there. That's a rather advanced version of rent analysis. That's why you have to have knowledge of it. After which you can go to the library and look at the books, the textbooks on Ifedora and Olusegun Kuye, and look at that topic. You have to establish, in fact, find out a similar property in that neighborhood. It must also be in the neighborhood. So there are two things we have mentioned here now. The basis. It has to be similar in design. So you have duplex for duplex, bungalow for bungalow, BQ for BQ, as the case may be. It has to be in the same neighborhood. That's 2. It has to be almost same, not necessarily exactly same, but almost same in finishings or in construction details and finishings. Right? We are using construction details and finishing because there are construction details that you may not know their construction details because the finishings has covered the construction details. If I use a 5 inches block to build and he uses a 9 inches block to build, they are different materials. But by the time we screed and paint, who is who is checking whether one is a 6 inches block and the other one is 9 inches hollow? You get. So that's why we merge. Of course, there are occasions where you also look at, oh, this property, they look alike or they don't look alike. It is you as a valuer that will do this analysis. Now, let's say you have gotten one that is close to the property. But you now find out that this one that is close to the property is old, far old. In fact, it's an ancestral house. Question: can you use it as a basis to analyze this modern building?
No.
Why no?
Because the other one is old. Why the other one?
The basis for comparison is too wide. It's too wide. You are using an 18-year-old girl to compare a 75-year-old woman. Because both of them are women. So you now that is a young boy looking for a wife, they now keep a 21-year-old girl and an 80-year-old girl. You will go and pick the 80-year-old woman.
No.
We'll put you for high. In fact, we'll begin pray for you. So that's the point we're making. Now, where the property that is similar in design and in construction details and in design